This is Glenn Campbell coming to you from Miami Beach with another video philosophy essay. Today's topic, triage. That may be a new word for you. It's used in the medical community, but we're going to apply it to something else. That's triage, T-R-I-A-G-E. In a medical sense, it refers to the sorting of patients so that the greatest good is gained from the limited treatment resources available. Let's say we're at war. Let's say there are 100 wounded soldiers on the battlefield, but there's only medical supplies and medical resources to treat 10 of those soldiers. Triage is the process of deciding which of those soldiers is going to be treated. You have 100 wounded soldiers. You want to save as many soldiers as you can. Where are you going to address your doctors and your medical equipment to save the most soldiers you can? Triage is the process of splitting up those soldiers into groups. There are certain soldiers wounded on the battlefield who are only slightly wounded. They're going to survive even if they don't get any treatment. There are other soldiers that are severely wounded. They're probably going to die no matter what you do. You can dump a lot of resources into these severely injured patients, but in the process you're taking them away from other patients. So frankly, you're going to let those people die. You're not going to treat the people who are slightly wounded. You're not going to treat the severely wounded. You're going to treat the middle group of patients, the patients that will take your resources and will give you the maximum benefit from the resources that need to be addressed. You can stop some bleeding and save one patient. You don't have to do any invasive surgery. So triage is a brutal concept. It means you've got to let people die. Out there on the battlefield, some medic, some low-level medic is deciding at the triage station who lives and who dies. But it has to happen because you want to save the most number of patients that you can. You go to a modern hospital, you also see the word triage in the emergency room. That's the first nurse that you see in the emergency room. He or she is going to decide where you go next. He or she will decide whether you get wheeled in immediately into the emergency room or whether you have to wait for hours out in the waiting room. That's the triage nurse is deciding that. And everybody hates the triage nurse because he or she is telling patients they have to wait. But it's an essential part of the operations of the hospital, of the emergency room, that someone makes these decisions. What we're going to do now is expand this concept to all of life. In fact, all of life is the same situation. You want to do good out there. You want to help people. But the people who need help are way beyond any resources that you have. You sitting here in Miami Beach or wherever you may be have no resources to address all the hungry in Africa, all the civil wars all around the world. We just don't have the resources to address that. We do have resources, but we have to decide, just like the hospital does, where we're going to direct those resources. There's a lot of worthy causes out there. Any big city, you could volunteer for hundreds of different organizations to help them out with their cause, and it's always a noble cause: saving the animals, feeding the hungry, working with the homeless. There's no end to the way you can apply your resources, but you as an individual have only limited resources. So once you make a noble decision to help humanity, the question is next, how are you going to do that? How can you best help humanity with the limited resources that you have? And it's a brutal decision, just like on the battlefield. You're going to have to tell the Friends for Animals that you can't help because you're working with some more noble cause. Just because you're working with a noble cause doesn't mean that you're doing the best for yourself. We could spend our whole lives on some low-level, good-meaning project, feeding the hungry. That doesn't mean that our life has been worthwhile. We want to know in our short stay here on Earth that we've done the most that we can for this planet before we check out. And that, unfortunately, is not the low-level stuff, saving individual kittens and puppies. That's not the best use of our resources, generally speaking. We want to always be shooting for a higher level. We want to be able to getting more bang for our buck out of the limited resources that we have. If we've got so many years on Earth, we want to put those years into the most benefit for mankind, right? I mean, I'm not trying to prove that concept here, but let's assume that you believe it. You're going to start out helping a few people. You know, as a kid, you might volunteer for some noble project. You might help clean up a nearby stream. But the more you know about the world, the more trivial that sort of thing seems. Yes, you're cleaning up the stream, but others are dying of cancer next door. Whenever we've addressed one little concern, we're proud of ourselves for helping save a puppy. We begin to realize there's a lot more that we could have done with those same resources. So our life, our personal lives, is an exercise in triage. I mean, everything we do, from the time we wake up in the morning to the time we go to bed at night, is an exercise in triage. We decide to do something. We decide to go to the movies. We decide to do one thing or another during the course of the day. We're implicitly deciding not to do a million other things that we could have done that would have been more productive. So as opportunities to do things come to you, you're dividing these opportunities up into groups, just like soldiers on the battlefield, and you're deciding what's the best use for my resources right now. There are things that you could do that might improve the world a little, but are they the most important things to do? There are people you can help, but are they people that could have helped themselves to begin with? Because if they can help themselves, just like those slightly wounded soldiers, it's best to let them go help themselves. At the same time, you don't want to be preoccupied with problems that are really too big for you to handle. World hunger is a terrible problem. War is a terrible problem. But the question is whether you and I, sitting here in our local community, really have any power to change war or world hunger. Right now, unless we're elected to public office or achieve some role in a world food bank, right now we don't have the power to change all those global news stories that we hear about on TV. So those are things, it's not productive for us to spend our time talking about the world situation when we have no control over the world situation. So there are little problems that aren't worth our effort because they can be resolved on their own. There are big problems that aren't worth our effort because we have no control over solving them. So we need to be focusing on the medium level problems, the savable patients, the places we can put our resources to get the most we can out of what we're doing. And we start at a fairly low level. We might join an organization that feeds the hungry. Over time, we realize that, well, just feeding the hungry isn't the issue. We might look at a bigger issue. We might decide, okay, now I want to look at birth control. I want to look at planned pregnancies, Planned Parenthood, and see if I can solve some of these world hunger problems by reducing the population or something like that. So the progress of your life is you start in the beginning looking at little problems, but you always want to be looking at a bigger picture, the bigger picture. As you gain in power, as you gain in influence over the world, you want to be looking at bigger things that you can do, better ways that you have of helping the world with the limited resources you have. A simple example is you can start out off in politics worried about local politics, and eventually you may work yourself up to become the President of the United States, who indeed does have a great deal of power over the fate of the world. You're probably not going to go in that direction. You're not going to be the President of the United States, but the same issue applies to you. You've got limited resources, and you need to do the best that you can with